It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, doesn't it? It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
There wasn't a first down. Not that much. The officiating, I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today. That spot, the graphic displays the unfair penalties. The one not called on us, on that Perry, clearly was being pushed before the ball got there. And the previous penalty they called on Delano Hill, the ball is uncatchable and by the receiver. See, I'm bitterly disappointed. Throw a hat, throw a stick, throw your sideline, that's a penalty.
This is the Silver Bullets Podcast on the Ozone Radio Network, your authority on all things Ohio State. Here are your hosts, Shannon, Sommers, and Chip Minnich.
Not Chip, if you have an iota of human feeling.
Hey there, Buckeye Nation. Welcome to another edition of the Silver Bullets Podcast on the Ozone Radio Network. We're going to discuss some college football, so I have Chip here with me. Chip, how are we doing?
Doing well, Shannon.
What we're going to do is last week's show didn't get edited and put out, so I'm going to add that onto the end of this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to discuss two topics that are pretty important that happened this week. And one of them being, let's start off with the Ryan Day gets promoted to the offensive coordinator and play caller. What are your thoughts on that? I know you're probably wanting to say something. So we discussed it on Acosta Field.
Yeah, I obviously congratulations to Coach Day, well deserved, and I think it speaks to the interest that NFL teams as well as other college football teams had in Coach Day, which is why Coach Meyer made that elevation, from the co-offensive coordinator to offensive coordinator. I think a lot of the belief that Ryan Day is going to be calling the plays in place of Kevin Wilson, I'm just kind of in a wait and see mode, because I think it's going to be a lot more collaborative than a lot of people are giving all the coaching staff credit for. I think that Kevin Wilson is a good enough coach to recognize that there's more than one way that will be in the best interest of Ohio State football to move the football down the field. Urban Meyer was effusive in his praise of Ryan Day this past season, and I think it's going to be the spring game is going to give us a glimpse, not the entire picture, but a glimpse of what the passing offense is going to look like without JT Barrett at the helm. Regardless of whether Dwayne Haskins, whether Joe Burrow, Tate Martell win the starting job, I think Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson both have definitive ideas as to what they want to do with the Ohio State passing offense. So I think it's nothing but good things for Ohio State football. I think Ryan Day is a rising star in the coaching profession, and Urban Meyer was just simply rewarding him for staying put in Columbus for at least another year. And I think it's going to make the 2018 season that much more exciting when that comes to pass next fall.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. And if anybody listened to Acosta Field, if not, my biggest thing was, but my thought on it was, by moving him to the offensive coordinator and play caller, I mean, obviously, you have, why is my head just all blanking here? Kevin Wilson. Obviously, you have Kevin Wilson there, next to him, helping in the booth and everything, and they're going to work together, and it's not a demotion for Kevin Wilson at all. And I think it's just all of them working together and helping his future and grooming him. Because, I mean, look, how many coaches has Urban Meyer been helping to get a head coaching job in either college football? And, I mean, indirectly, he helped Vrabel be able to get a head coaching job in the NFL based on the report that came out that he's told the the Titans GM and owner, look, when I first interviewed with Urban Meyer, I did so bad that he called me up and he says, look, 6:00 in the morning, we're going to redo this because you just had the worst interview ever, and we're going to redo it. And he did it, and he stayed with Urban for 2 years and went off into the NFL. And now he's a head coach of the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen, when we talk about the coaches that have come through Columbus during Urban Meyer's tenure, a lot of people moving on to better opportunities. I mean, it would be fair to say that Ryan Day, if he had wanted to be a college head coach, supposedly that there was a position that was his for the taking, and he turned that down. He turned down the opportunity to be the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans with Mike Vrabel. It's a great learning environment because you're working for a very demanding coach, but a coach that's giving you a tremendous insight into what makes a successful program tick as it relates to college football, the intensity that Urban Meyer brings to recruiting, the idea of an offense that is going to, spread the opposition, and make them cover the entire length of the football field. You're looking at a guy that has come up through the ranks himself and can probably, I've never heard him speak about it, but, give you some tremendous insight as to, what it was like when he was a first-time coach at Bowling Green, or when he went from Bowling Green to Utah, or from Utah to Florida. So the idea of, hey, if you are a first-time head coach, this might be the kind of program that you might be interested in. So I think Ryan Day made the best decision for him. From what I understand, he's married and has young children. So I'm guessing that perhaps there was also some discussion about not necessarily wanting to uproot his family only a year into Columbus. I just think it's the best thing for Ryan Day, and it's certainly the best thing for Ohio State's quarterbacks, because when you talk about the three quarterbacks that are on the roster, as well as incoming freshman Matthew Baldwin, they know that they're going to be working with, for at least the I don't want to call them veterans, but the three quarterbacks that were on the roster in 2017 that are going to be on in 2018. They know that they don't have to learn the style of a new quarterback coach, that they've got the same mentor that they had the previous season. So, that if anything, that just makes their development in the offense that much better going into the 2018 season.
Yeah, and you mentioned recruiting and everything. We had other news that came out this week, and at first it's kind of like a punch in the side, if you will, and just kind of took the breath out of everybody. But you have to look at, we're just kind of joking around. Tom Orr tweeted out that he's going to be going to the Buckeye Grove and digging up somebody's tree. And it just, you have to give credit to Vrabel for wanting to come to Ohio State, because Ryan Day was mentioned as possibly being an offensive coordinator for him. But yet Kerry Combs leaves and joins Vrabel in Tennessee. How big of an impact do you think that this is for the Buckeyes going forward, losing somebody like Kerry Combs?
I think it's tremendous. It would be disrespectful to Coach Combs' legacy at Ohio State if you don't think about for those that follow him on Twitter. He was notorious for talking about planting flags in fill in the blank. He would go up to Michigan. He would go to Detroit and Cass Tech, or he'd be talking about planting flags down in Florida or whatever. the fact that, I think it speaks volumes about Coach Combs that several years ago, he was the head coach at Cincinnati Coleraine, and he built that program into one of the top programs in the state of Ohio. And from there, he was able to move into the college ranks, first at the University of Cincinnati, and then moving up to Ohio State. So I think it's, the fact that Mike Vrabel worked with Kerry Combs at Ohio State, there was some familiarity with Kerry Combs as a coach. About, Mike Vrabel is a pretty intense guy anyway. They don't come any much more intense than Kerry Combs. I think it's going to, the impact on the recruiting side is going to be the first thing that I would be concerned about if I was Urban Meyer. I'm not trying to minimize his coaching impact. I think it is lessened by the addition of Alex Grinch to the staff. Alex Grinch, who played defensive back in college, probably coached defensive backs, while being also the coordinator at Washington State. I think between Alex Grinch and Greg Schiano, I think that the secondary, hopefully that the coaching quality will not be hurt too much within the coaching side. But I would be less than honest if I didn't say that Kerry Combs, I think there's going to be a huge drawback on the recruiting side, because Kerry Combs was widely recognized for his outstanding work as a recruiter on the Ohio State staff.
I believe it was last year he was awarded the Recruiter of the Year, NCAA.
That's correct. Yes.
So I mean, yeah, it's going to be a big hit as far as recruiting. Definitely, without that, you're going to have to find somebody that's as good of a recruiter as he was. And I mean, you look at somebody, as you said, he started off in high school and has come up through the ranks, and that really spoke to a lot of the high schoolers and stuff like that as far as wanting to come to Ohio State, because he understood what the high schoolers and stuff like that were looking at for going to universities and such like that, what schools to pick. I've got nothing but praise for the man. He's done every single thing for Ohio State, and he's been a professional through and through. And the team as a whole, I'm sure, is going to miss him. I mean, you see videos that have been circulating around where he's talking smack to the wide receivers. Are you guys going to show up to practice today? Instead of just standing there and blah, blah, blah. And, he helped raise all the other levels of the game up by just, talking to guys, and just he brings that energy with him. And I wish him nothing but success for, being at Tennessee. You're right with the Alex Grinch and the Shannon with the secondary. I mean, now Urban Meyer sitting there and he's got a sheet, and what coaches can he bring in order to now either fill in the gap left behind for him, or now technically another 10th assistant coach or whatever. So I'm sure they're working hard on that, and somebody is going to be good at recruiting is going to be job number one on that.
One thing is for certain as it relates to Kerry Combs and the NFL draft, and this is something that Michael Cicero, I think, he had tweeted out about how I think he referred to Kerry Combs as kind of like the human equivalent of Red Bull.
Yeah.
And I said the ESPN and the NFL Network are doing themselves a disservice, as well as football fans everywhere a disservice, if they don't put a camera within the Tennessee Titans war room during the NFL draft, just to kind of give people an idea as to how intense Kerry Combs can get. I can only imagine during the NFL draft, especially if, let's say, Tennessee picks one of the various Ohio State defensive backs that might be eligible. Like I think Denzel Ward, it's entirely probable that Denzel Ward will not be available by the time Tennessee makes their first round selection. But in the later rounds, like a player like Damon Webb, or, possibly even on day 3, like Eric Smith or whoever that is is eligible for the NFL draft from Ohio State if Tennessee happens to choose them. Not to be able to witness how Kerry Combs reacts to that would be very unfortunate.
Yeah, I definitely agree. All right, was there anything else you want to recap for this week before we send our listeners on to our show from last week?
No, if anything, winter conditioning has begun, but again, it's just simply winter conditioning. It's not official spring practice. Still waiting for the official word as to when that will commence. But yeah, keep your eyes and ears open for any possible assistant coach news or anything like that. I guess the last thing I would say is that supposedly Jalen Holmes is impressing down at the Senior Bowl, and that's great for Jalen Holmes. JT Barrett had an impressive week at the East-West Shrine game. So for those former Buckeyes, keep up the good work as they prepare for their next football careers, wherever it may take them, hopefully in the NFL draft come April.
Yeah. I think that Tony might have said it was like the beginning of May was going to be the first practice. I don't remember the date if he said it or not. I'll have to recheck with him, and we'll definitely let everybody know. But in the meantime, go ahead and listen to or enjoy what we did for last week, and we will talk to everybody again next week. All right, today we're going to, it helps if I put my notes up here so I can kind of see them so I'm not reaching around. We're going to discuss about the players that decided to return to play for Ohio State one last year, some of the guys that either retired or medical injuries or transferred, and we're going to have a discussion about Keith Jackson, who he lost. So let's go ahead and start off the conversation with Keith Jackson. I made some points and discussed some things on across the field, and I know you're a big fan of his, so I know you haven't had opportunity to discuss it, so I'll let you go ahead and start it off.
Well, I appreciate that. Rest in peace, Keith Jackson. Best wishes and sincere condolences to his family and friends. Obviously, I'm just speaking from the perspective of a fan. I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out all the great comments that you and Tony and Tom had on across the field. I think you said a lot of the great memories that you had. I have to admit, without stealing from across the field too much, one of my memories of Keith Jackson that you brought up, Shannon, was in 1991 with that dreadful punt return by Desmond Howard. And the fact I see you kind of just grimacing and shaking your head, but the compliment that I have of Keith Jackson of that whole thing is, as it was happening, Keith Jackson had no idea that Desmond Howard was going to pull the pose. And the fact that it came to mind for him to say, "Hello, Heisman," and then the next moment it happened. So my compliment of Keith Jackson was he was a man who truly, he did not steal from the moment. He let the moment have its moment, if you will, and he just merely commented on it. And I think, I can't recall, but when you think of the 2002 national championship season, the fact that in the 2003 Fiesta Bowl he was the play-by-play guy with Dan Fouts. You notice I didn't say the other things.
The great
did.
Dan Fouts.
Yeah, I'll let you guys have that. I'll saddle you with that. But in all sincerity, the fact that he called the game as it was. He recognized the magnitude of what that meant for Ohio State football fans. My compliments to you that on across the field, you pointed out the fact that a lot of the big games Keith Jackson did, were for Michigan, and you never got the impression that he was rooting for Michigan. You never got the impression he was rooting against Michigan. And it's just a shame that college football fans like you and I, like Tony, Tom, all we have now are cherished memories, but we're losing one of the greats who did not try to become bigger than the sport that they were calling.
Yeah, and I've been watching a lot of videos and just interviews with him and stuff like that. And one of the biggest things that he always would say, like how you mentioned about not taking over the moment, is that it wasn't his job to be a part of the moment. It was his job to comment, to paint the picture, to help people who, like their vision might not be great and they're sitting there watching on TV, just to help paint that picture. I mean, Desmond Howard didn't even know he was going to strike that pose. I mean, he said that he was running down the field after he went by the kicker or punter, whoever it was, that, I didn't know I was going to strike it. And I'm sitting there going to myself, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I should. And it just, the timing with Keith Jackson was just, it was flawless, but it's something it's etched in our minds as Buckeye fans for eternity, just because it was that knife in the heart, the Cleveland area kid who spurned Ohio State to go to that school up north, and we couldn't beat that school. I mean, it wasn't as bad in, like you said, 91, and it was going to get worse in the 90s, but it was the rivalry. I mean, I didn't really understand or get to see and appreciate the Woody and Bo, because I think Woody's last game was like 78.
Correct.
So, I mean, I was just a little toddler at the time. So I didn't understand or get to, watch Woody. I don't remember much about Bo, unfortunately. I forget what year he, retired. But it was Lloyd Carr against Cooper, and it became a beatdown, and it was disgusting as an Ohio State fan to sit there and say, oh man, these guys, they just keep kicking our butts and having those top teams. But then you had somebody like Keith Jackson calling the games, and you wouldn't know he was a fan of either team. The only thing he was a fan of was the Rose Bowl, and you knew he was a fan of the Rose Bowl. I mean, he thought that everything in the world for college football revolved around the Rose Bowl, and, the granddaddy of them all. He's the one that coined that phrase. I mean, he graduated from Washington State. He called some football for them. He ended up starting his career, I believe, calling games for Washington. So, I mean, he's called a ton of college football games. He called, I think, 4 World Series, and Mr. October, Reggie Jackson, 4 home runs or 3 home runs or whatever it was in a game. He was there calling that with Howard Cosell. I mean, some of the greats. People, the millennials probably don't remember Howard Cosell and stuff like that. They don't remember that before in ESPN there was ABC, the Wide World Sports. On Sundays or Saturdays, they would have different sports and stuff like that. I mean, he did the Olympics and everything. So, I mean, it's a true treasure of a voice that is lost. And a lot of people, I never really noticed a Southern draw in his dialect, but it's just the way he talked. And I really became a big fan of his. And watching some videos, one of the biggest things he says is never stop improving on your vocabulary. Something I got to improve on myself. So,
well, maybe that's the legacy for Keith Jackson for you, and for me too.
Yeah, there's a lot of great things and a lot of great stuff to enjoy, and I'm just glad that we were part of the generations that enjoyed him for college football. Because to me, he was the voice of college football. Yes, there's Brett Musburger. He was great. Vern Lilliquist, who just retired last year, he was another great one. And it's obviously times have to change and everything, but all these guys grew up in an era where radio came first, and that was the picture, how everything had to be painted. And now the people that are taking over are more familiar with more of TV than they are with the old time. Just that's all everybody had was radio and having to paint a picture. So now it's, getting that whole analytical stat and knowing the ins and outs and all that kind of stuff. So it's different, but it's still good, but it's kind of different. All right, let's move on to see here. Only 3 players end up going to the NFL draft and declaring early. We already knew at the Texas Rose Bowl that Desmond Denzel Ward was declaring because he sat out. We had a feeling that Sam Hubbard was going to be because he took place in the senior tackling drill at practice. And forgive me for forgetting who the third name is because I didn't write it down.
Jerome Baker.
Yes, Jerome Baker. We had a feeling that was going to, I would have been really surprised that if he would have stayed. Which leads us to the question that you wanted to ask and discuss is, out of all the players that did end up staying, like Paris Campbell, Mike Weber, Draymond Jones, there's Sean Nurnberger, I joke around about. And there's a lot of them that came back, and it was great to see. Your question is, who is the biggest surprise? To me, that ended up staying. To me, it's easy to sit there and say, hey, Draymond Jones, possible first-round pick. But Mike Weber, bottom line, Mike Weber coming back, you have to figure that he lost his starting job because of injury, and he has a chance to sit there and say, all right, I'm going to the NFL now, and I'm not even going to worry about it. We're done with college. But he's sitting there saying, all right, I need to improve myself. I need to, either get my degree or what. And he came back, and to me, he's the biggest surprise, really.
Well, I compliment you because that was going to be my pick, and I even shared with you. I said I'm going to deliberately choose somebody differently. So I had some other names written down here because I think Mike Weber is very obvious. After the Cotton Bowl, he was seen weeping during Carmen, Ohio, and most people suspected that meant that he was going to declare. And the shelf life of an NFL running back is very, very limited, so it was not surprising. I'm glad he came back simply because, quite frankly, the NFL Draft Advisory Board, the way it works is a player they can ask for what their draft status is, and they're told that they're a first rounder, a second rounder, or they should come back to school. So I can only suspect that he was given the should come back to school, and he's following the draft advisory board with such a deep running back pool. That's probably in his best interest, I think, to have a solid, what would be a redshirt junior year and come out, for the 2019 draft and probably elevate his draft stock. So I think that's a great pick by you. So to be fair, I'm a man of my word. I'm going to pick somebody. I'm going to be picking somebody completely different.
We're not going to be like Acosta Field and.
No. Like I said, I'm not taking shots. I'm just saying.
No, I want to.
Yeah, this is kind of an obscure player that I don't think a lot of people really thought that he was going to go. But in the back of my mind, a little part of me is a little surprised that he did not go. And that is Terry McLaurin. Simply because, not that he was ready to go, mind you. I will subscribe to the same rationale that I just applied to Mike Weber, that I'm sure that his draft advisory recommendation was to come back for another year. It's simply because Terry McLaurin graduated in December. He has his degree in communications. He's fully, he's ready to go in terms of with his academic standing. So my thinking was maybe he was going to be looking at the fact, hey, I've been a captain, I've got my degree, I'm coming off of a very good, Big Ten championship game. I'll take my shot, kind of almost along the lines of what Tyvis Powell did, after the 2015 season. Not that worked out well for Tyvis Powell in the sense that Tyvis Powell was an undrafted free agent, but maybe that was kind of where I was thinking that, maybe Terry McLaurin, the fact that there are so many wide receivers that are coming back. But I think to be fair, I applaud Terry McLaurin, Mike Weber, Draymond Jones, all these guys. There were whispers that Isaiah Prince might go. All these players that could have possibly gone, they're doing themselves a service by coming back to Ohio State to get stronger, to potentially improve their draft stock, to possibly help Ohio State win another Big Ten championship and maybe a college football playoff berth in the 2018 season. So I certainly have no regrets. If anything, the fact that whoever the quarterback is, and I think, everyone kind of seems to believe that it's Dwayne Haskins' job to lose. And I'm of the opinion Joe Burrow is going to have a lot to say about this, more than I think a lot of fans are. I know you're in the same boat and I know how other people feel. And Tate Martell, we haven't seen yet. My point being, getting back to Terry McLaurin, that wide receiver room, the fact that they are experienced, that they have Paris Campbell, they have Johnny Dixon, they have Terry McLaurin, they have, in addition to Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor, and they've got other guys coming up through the ranks like Jalen Harris, Elijah Gardner's a redshirt freshman whom we haven't seen. I just think that can only help whoever the quarterback is. So I think it's a great thing that all these guys are coming back for the 2018 season.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great thing. And for folks that have listened to Acosta Field know that I am the chairman of Joe Burrow's starting quarterback in the 2018 season for Ohio State. But and I mentioned also on the last episode of Acosta Field, well, by the time this airs, it won't be the last one, but it'll be on the one that was released the week, or not, on Wednesday. But anyways, I discussed about the blocking, the outside blocking. I mean, we're going to have a young interior line, offensive line. You're not going to have Jamarco Jones. You're going to have Michael Jordan. He's going to be back. But you're not going to have Billy Price. Prince is probably going to be moving over to left tackle. So, I mean, is it going to be Knox? Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to take that role? And who's going to be the left or the right tackle? And it's just the question marks for the offensive line. And Terry McLaurin has to be, I think, right now for the team, one of the best blockers for the wide receivers on the outside in order to help everybody else. So hopefully players like the Benjamin Victor, the Austin Mack, the freshmen that are coming in are going to understand and see what he is doing, to take that in order for them to understand this is how you have to get playing time. I mean, Urban Meyer said, if in order for you to get a playing time, that you need to be playing special teams and you need to know how to block. So they have to be able to do that on the outside in order to spring open runs for whoever the quarterback is, for, J.K. and Weber, whoever the H-back. It's just there's a bunch of different stuff. So, I mean, I think that's it's a good pick for you on that. I was surprised. I was actually thinking you were going to go with Draymond Jones, so that's why I went with Mike Weber.
No. Draymond Jones, you guys nailed it on across the field. I think the fact that Ohio State is losing players, like Tyquan Lewis, like Sam Hubbard, like Jalen Holmes at the defensive end position. I agree with the premise that more than likely Draymond Jones is going to get every opportunity to play on the outside and probably move inside on that Rushman package, just because he is quite formidable as a pass rusher. He just hasn't been able to showcase it yet. He's been kind of putting the team above, himself. But I think this spring is going to definitely give him an opportunity to bring that draft status up. I was surprised that he came back. I'm pleased that he did, though.
Yeah, and when I seen Stuart Mendel talk about that, Clemson has the best defensive line in America, and yet you've got Draymond Jones and Bosa on the line. And let's not even mention who's going to be a sophomore next year, Chase Young, who he's had a handful of sacks, just getting in a little bit of, garbage time. And he's actually played some meaningful snaps, too, during the season because of that rotation. So that's going to bode well. And you're not double teaming anybody on that line when you got those guys on there. So, I mean, that's just going to be a force to be reckoned with. And schools like Michigan, if they didn't improve their offensive line, then we're just going to see another situation, which is fine for us Buckeye fans. But you're going to see another situation of, holy crap, here we are again, just getting our butts beat. All right, so let's talk about some of the guys who either medical hardships like A.J. Alexander, tight end, some of the transfers we had or retirements. I'll let you go ahead and take over that one.
Okay. Well, I want to give a tip of the hat to Tom Orr, who writes for the ozone.net. He's on across the field. And He's
all right.
been what's that?
I'd say he's all right.
Yeah, yeah. He's been doing a great job of keeping track of Ohio State's roster, in terms of like the scholarship roster, in terms of where they are. Like, to the best of my knowledge, they're presently at 85. And the reason why I kind of brought this up as a possible topic is with the signing day, the official signing day is still coming up in a few weeks in February. So, Ohio State's still on the hunt for players, and I want to follow Tom's lead and not, speculating as to who is definitely going to transfer, who, whatever. But there are players like Kerry Hawkins or, excuse me, sorry, Kerry Hawkins is going to Youngstown State. I'm not sure where Kevin Fetter's going. Wallabaugh is going to Duke, and Trayvon Grimes is going to Florida. So I'm going to put myself on mute while I cough, and you can talk.
Sorry, I was going to sneeze earlier, so I'm surprised that mine didn't happen. But, Trayvon Grimes is kind of a shocker just based on the simple fact that Urban Meyer canceled a press conference during the season in order to go down to Florida in order to try to help take care of him. But he ended up having, the hardships at home and being homesick and the new regime in Florida. And I'm sure maybe that whatever discussions that Urban had with him, that since Urban and I guess Mullins are probably close because they're friends and used to coach together, they probably had a conversation to help him go, land at Florida. But I mean, we are at a situation to where I think we're hoping for another defensive player, defensive lineman. Hopefully he's going to be announcing here by the time we hear this yesterday, so we'll know if he got him on Friday. We'll know if we got Friday on Friday or if
right. Yeah.
Then you have they have a need for offensive tackles, and you always have a need for that. And I believe they talked about on Acosta Field about offering a 3-star defensive defensive back. That it's kind of, so I mean, if you land 3 more players, that's going to put you at 88. So you have to figure by the time, or I think since training camp isn't August 1st anymore, I think it's like the last week of July or second to last week of July. Now you have to be down to 85 or 84 for your
85.
Yeah, so you have to be, so I mean, the writing's on the wall if they're still going after players that 3 people are going to be leaving the program. Who they are, we don't know. Sure, we can speculate, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Tom says, it's not really fair to put out there like, oh, I think this guy's going to go. We don't know. I just think Ohio State under Urban Meyer, they do a tremendous job of managing the roster. Mark Pantoni, that's, kind of, he's kind of laid up the board, so to speak, in terms of, like you mentioned, defensive linemen, offensive tackles, another defensive back, whatever it might be. There's, possibly even another running back, just following all the different recruiting buzz that's around Ohio State. So I think they have a pretty good idea as to, players who might be leaving due to, medical reasons. They also, possible transfers. I think they have a pretty good idea as to where things stand. Like as it relates to, like I said, like Kerry Hawkins, he's going to Youngstown State. That's probably an issue about playing time. Same thing. Jack Wallabaugh, he has an opportunity to go to Duke and play. You mentioned, Grimes is going to Florida, which is a shame because, he had, I think about like 5 catches, this year. I mean, not any meaningful time, but, he was a player from last year's recruiting class that the staff was very high up on. Unfortunately, some family medical issues kind of have him, focused on wanting to be closer to home. And I applaud the Ohio State coaching staff for not standing in the way, to encourage him to do what he thinks is best. And I wish him all the best at Florida. I wish all the players all the best, no matter where they go. Unfortunately, When it comes to like AJ Alexander, as you mentioned, he had to give up the game, due to medical reasons. But Ohio State fans, can only wish the best for these young men, no matter what their circumstances. They're doing what they feel is in their best interest, especially as it relates to AJ Alexander, their best interest long-term health-wise. So, but we'll see. I would be remiss though if we're talking about the roster, if you did not share with our listeners, if they haven't already heard it on Across the Field, the spicy tidbit of breaking news that you gave at the onset of Across the Field, one of the episodes as it relates to the spring game.
Yeah, we're gonna touch on that here in a second. I just wanted to real quick. I don't know if you've read this or not, and I should have written his name down because I'm just terrible at remembering names. The not rookie, but the incoming freshman tight end that is for Ohio State.
Ruckert.
He is going to have a wide awakening when he steps foot on campus for Ohio State and starts getting into the grind of the playing time. Because I don't know if you've read this or not, but I guess he was in a practices for a bowl, Polynesian bowl or something like that, I guess out in Hawaii, I'm guessing. And he was talking to somebody from 24/7, and the discussion came up, I guess, about Michigan, and he made the comments that Michigan's not a rival.
Yeah.
Because in his time, they've only won like 3 games. Okay, I get that. I can understand that. There's a history here. During Acosta Field, when we did the Keith Jackson segment, I opened up, I believe, with, I put in there the 100-year anniversary, Keith Jackson calling the beginning of the game. I mean, that was in, 2006? So
Actually, 2003.
Yeah, you're right, 2003.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's now 2018, so we're looking 15 years now since then, so we're going on the 115th meeting of these two schools. It's a rivalry.
Yeah, well, he'll learn.
Yeah.
I mean...
especially when he gets into the game.
Oh, yeah. And, that's probably... I've never met the young man. You're talking about somebody who... I know that Michigan recruited him quite heavily, kind of with the hope that the fact that, Jim Harbaugh traditionally has featured the tight end, so they were very, very hopeful of landing his services. I know that Michigan was one of his finalists. The fact that Ohio State did, he's probably been getting a lot of guff from Michigan fans, that are still like a lot of sour grapes on their part. And he probably just thought, I'll just twist that knife in a little bit further by saying it's not really a rivalry. I'm sure Urban Meyer, as you said, I think the upperclassmen, I'm sure Mickey Marotti, when he gets on campus, he's not one of the early enrollees. So his time will come, but I'm sure Mickey Marotti will, ever so gently, when they're in the weight room, like when those gentle words of encouragement are needed. Sure, he'll be reminded of, the mistakes that he has made by making that statement. So I'm sure it'll get corrected by members of the coaching staff as well as by members of the team.
Yeah, we've talked to quite a bit of former players, and one of the things that they say about that game, and any interviews you listen to, that everybody hits a little harder. They're geared up a lot more. There's actually something at stake in that game just based on bragging rights because it is the greatest rivalry in sport.
Yeah.
All right, so about the announcement, April 14th, I almost forgot because I have it written down here to, mention the announcement of the spring game, but I was like, I forgot to write the date. April 14th, 2018, mark it down in your calendars. Ohio State will be playing Michigan man, getting really messed up here. Ohio State will play Michigan in the Horseshoe for lacrosse, and after the lacrosse game will be the spring game. And it'll probably be like, like Tony was saying on Acosta Field, 70, 80 degrees. The first time everybody's getting sunburnt, and it's one of those ones. To me, spring comes around when the home opener comes around. And was it 2 years ago for the Indians? I'm standing there at the gates waiting to get in, and you see it's kind of crazy out, and they call it right before they open the gates. And the next day we went out there, and it's 38 degrees, but the way where we were sitting at and the sun was coming through, it was a warm 38 degrees. But for some reason, it seems, and I think of all the spring games I've been to, there's only one that I remember that it was raining the whole time. And that was probably about 2005, 2006, maybe.
2005, yeah.
So,
I was there. It was sleeting. I was sleeting, and my favorite memory of it was I was at that game, and I mean it was miserable. I mean I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I mean it was sleeting. It was just miserable. It was cold. Only true diehards went to it. I went to it, and this was pre Big Ten Network. This was pre
there wasn't many people. There wasn't many people there.
That's right. That's right.
us diehards.
Yeah, exactly. And what I loved years after the fact, it was when Jim Tressel was still the head coach. They were talking about the spring game and how it has to be how getting players exposure, getting them in and out, and I remember Coach Tressel saying during an interview, he said, "Yeah, I remember one time we had a spring game and the weather was just so lousy, and after a while, we were just hoping for like the game to end and at one point, I'd say, to one of the coaches, get that group in or get this player in. And some of those players would say to the coaches, I don't want to go in there, because it was that miserable of a day. And the fact that you had diehard, like you and me going to watch a meaningless game, but just kind of speaks to the passion of Ohio State fans. I, for one, I already have it marked down. I can't guarantee that I'm going to bring my sons, but I'm definitely planning on coming. I hope to hook up with you, hope to hook up with, Tony and Tom and everyone else, to just kind of see what 2018 has to offer as it relates to the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Definitely. I know I'll be working there, so I'll be running around the stadium somewhere. And it's one of those ones where we've learned in years past that we have to kind of coordinate something beforehand through text messages or whatever. Because when you get 100-some thousand people down there in Columbus, it's just you're not getting data, you're not getting messages, and it's like, okay.
Right.
You remember during that spring game, though, a couple of kids up in the bleachers holding a big banner, barbecue?
I can't – if that was you –
It wasn't me. It wasn't me, but it was actually my stepson and his buddy. They started while he's going to school down there in Columbus, they started a group on campus, the Ohio State Buckeye Barbecue Group, I think it is, or something like that, Buckeye Barbecue Club. And he's one of the founding members for it. So it's kind of, that was like when they were first starting it, and him and his buddy, I think it's Foz or Friz or something, I can't remember his name correctly, but they're standing out there in the cold with this big banner, Ohio State Barbecue Club. So, it's just one of those things. I remember they were, I can't remember if the south stands were closed off, but somehow they got over there and they were standing there with it. So, and there wasn't very many people like we were talking about in the stands at that time. I mean, you didn't have this 110,000. The last time I seen the least amount of people besides a lacrosse match was for the national championship recognition, ceremony in Columbus, and I think it was like 30-some degrees.
It was cold. I think it was even colder than that.
That concrete was really, 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 really cold. And it was like when you got done after that, as much fun as it was, everybody was sprinting to their vehicles because it was like, they said it was going to be in the 40s, but it's not.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Chip, before I go and move on to basketball here, let's go ahead and let the fine folks know where they could find you at in your work.
I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich, and as we've been talking about, I can be found on Hayes and Cannon as a contributor as well as Athlon Sports. So feel free to shoot us questions, comments, anything Ohio State football related. Shannon and I are always happy to talk about here on the Silver Bullets podcast.